We're back again. This is Brighter Morning with Bo on MCTV, Multicultural TV, and I am Bo Tiwari. Our guest to follow is Mr. Kheston Warkins of Allegori Innovations, and we'll talk to him in a few minutes. If you have The Guardian, you can read my article. The article is entitled, Will Trinidad and Tobago Even Try? It's on page 12 of The Guardian, and what it addresses are the issues that are coming out of the G20 summit in Italy and the COP26 event in Glasgow, Scotland, and its implications for the Caribbean and our difficult situation of being a small oil-producing country, but also an island on the receiving end of the effects of climate change, which has really been caused by the industrialization process in the wealthier countries from the 19th century to the present time. So you can take a look at that particular article, Will Trinidad and Tobago Even Try? And it asks the question of whether we can play any kind of leadership role on these matters among islands and in the world at all, given our particular dilemma here in Trinidad and Tobago. The big news, as I indicated, was the matters in Parliament yesterday. It was the matters in Parliament yesterday having to do with the appointment of the Public Service Commission. And the other big news, of course, is the COVID climbing and what are going to be the implications of that for Trinidad and Tobago. We have Mr. Kheston Warkins on the line, so we will begin a discussion with him now. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very good. Glad to have you on Brighter Morning with Bo. And let's start by asking you, Kheston, to explain to people what Allegori Innovations is, your company, and what you do, but also if you would explain to them your background, your education, and what you have been trained or equipped to do, and how you do it.
Right. Okay. So what I will start off first with is why we do what we do, and I will go through the other things that you said. We want to give people power and give them control over themselves. I think that's one of the key things that we need to have as human beings, that self-control, and that relates to different aspects of our lives. So that why is expressed through Allegori, and Allegori is a neuroinnovation company, and we build and design innovations using neuroscience data and now more so artificial intelligence. So that's what the company is. And then the last question that you asked was about my background. So I did medical neuroscience at the University of Sussex in Brighton, England. I came back to Trinidad and did research, was a research assistant effectively, epilepsy and anxiety, and I went on to do some postgraduate work in molecular genetics. But my emphasis and my strength are in data science, big data science especially, and also in neuroscience. And my work is to make these things that are locked up in science textbooks and papers practical, so people in everyday life can use them, consume them, and engage.
Okay, what are the human problems that you find prevalent that your expertise can help with? And I'm not getting a clear sound from you, so...
Okay, let me try to come closer and I'll a lot as well.
All right. Maybe you can speak close. Right, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, great. So you were asking about the kinds of people that our work would serve, correct?
Yes, and what are the human problems that you can solve? Yeah.
Well, okay. So most of the challenges that we get requests to help are children that have issues focusing in school, right? And then the other one that we get quite commonly is people having anxiety and issues with sleep. And the interesting thing is that each of those have gotten exacerbated since the pandemic, right? It's gotten worse. Online school has been thrusted upon our children, and they still have to prepare for seriously heavy exams like CA. That's another story. And then on top of that, we have the stress in the home for the family members because they're isolated, and then they express increasing likelihood of anxiety, and then that causes issues with sleep. So before in the world, it was 1 in 5 people that had issues, had insomnia over the course of a year. But it's definitely more now. They haven't published statistics on what it is globally, but it's definitely an increase, right? And I mean, this is across the board. This is with doctors and frontline workers. This is also with people in the media. It's with teachers. It's with pretty much every sector on the planet has been affected one way or the other because of the pandemic. And our purpose is to resolve some of these issues, especially starting with focus, problems due to inattention and anxiety and sleep.
Yeah, well, let's deal with this issue of sleep. I mean, thank God I don't have sleep problems. As soon as I feel sleepy, I hit the bed, and within 5 minutes, I can be asleep. So I've always been grateful for that. Normally, my sleeping time would be from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. But with this job now, I have to get up at 4 a.m., so I go to sleep at 9. Once I get 7 hours sleep, I'm okay. But there are some people who will wake up 5 times in the night. There are some people who, when their bed hits the pillow, it takes them 2.5 hours to get to sleep. They just cannot sleep. So how do you deal with something like that from your technologically innovative approach?
Yes. So I love that you've contrasted it with your experience because not everyone has sleeping problems, right? And it's clear that you do certain things in order to accelerate your time to sleep or to get ready for bed, or to have your wind down period and so on. So what happens in a lot of cases is clients, they lay down in bed, and you'll notice sometimes it take long. They lay down in bed, and when they close their eyes, so they pick up the phone or they pick up a book, they start to read, they start to get sleepy, and then they close their eyes, and then their mind starts running again. So it takes them hours to get on. So when they sit down and read or when they use social media, the brain starts to go into a particular state, right? It's a low alpha state. Alpha waves in the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, is responsible or connected to your alertness or your awareness that you are awake. So if these alpha waves are reducing or being inhibited before you fall asleep, our thing is we know what the end result is. Let's teach the client how to stimulate. So we use some technology called EEG, and I'll just put it on my head so people can see it.
Yes.
And this device basically measures my brain activity in real time. And we visualize that on the screen so that the client can use it and benefit from it. And then we teach them to go to those 3 states that come before they fall asleep. So what we're doing is sort of simulating what happens when they start to fall asleep, and that makes it easier and faster for them to do so. So we've had people who've had insomnia for 25 years, and they get like 3 hours sleep or so on a good night, right? I've had some people that get 30 minutes. So they get sleep, they have so much issue sleeping that they have to take medication. And after just 1 or 2 sessions of treatment, 20 minutes of engagement, right? Just a short bit of engagement, they're able to fall asleep in some cases in as little as 7 minutes. Sleep during the night because that's another issue that we have, sleep interruptions. So they wake up in the night and then mind running because they're thinking about what they have to do for work tomorrow. And that typically happens for people in managerial positions, people that have a lot of responsibility, and also especially for creators. So yeah.
So, I mean, but sleep is so critical though. I mean, it's hard for you to function at optimal level if you don't get enough sleep. And it has other health effects of a negative nature if you don't get enough sleep on a consistent basis. I can tell you, for instance, if I'm sleep deprived for 2 days, it has an effect. on me, and I have to kind of catch up. And once I catch up, I'm okay. I can go for 16 hours again. It's not a problem. But I must get that sleep, you know. And this business of managing sleep is really important, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important, right? And I think what's happened over the course of the last few decades, I think our sleep starts to get interrupted, especially when we're in XCA class. So when we're doing common entrance, all this worry, all this studying, all this stuff, and then it gets exacerbated when we reach into when we do O levels or CXE because we think, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to do it all nighter. So we have this really, really bad relationship with education, bad relationship with sleep, and that's kind of precipitated some of these problems. And the other part I think is the industrialized society that we have. We've made humans units of production, right? And we're not treating them as humans, as people. So we want them to arrive, we want them to give 120%. But we don't see that they're humans and their mental well-being is really important. So companies try to help with EAP programs, but it doesn't necessarily have the full coverage that's required to serve everyone. I think and typically you get like 48% coverage with a EAP program. So people just come in when there's trauma, when there's an issue, but there needs to be continual work for mental what's the word? I want to find another word, but fortitude is coming to my mind right now. So there needs to be continual work for that, for mental wellness.
Yeah.
And sleep is just one of the, I call them the canaries. You know, when you had those caves and you go down and the canary would die and would explode before the workers, that thing that breaks really early, really early on that we need to pay attention to. Because if we don't have proper sleep, we don't recover. Just like you said, you can't live a full, complete life without having good quality sleep and recovery.
Yeah, but I want to make the distinction that what you deal with is not things like sleep apnea and so on, which have to be treated differently. What you deal with is the difficulty of managing your brain waves so that you can get to the point where you can accept sleep and then sleep deeply. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. We have partners that we work with, like ISD Health Solutions, and they handle some of the clinical aspects of things. So the sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and other things like that. They do that because there are some things with sleep that are respiratory, and then some things in sleep that are neurological. And we have a very kind of simple, neat way of intervening that is non-medicinal and also is non-invasive and doesn't require any medication.
Yes. And I like the fact that you said you can put this thing in your head. You put the instrument just now on your head. And you said what that does is that it allows you to measure. But after that, it's really helping the person, if you want to call that person he or she a patient, but it's helping the person to understand what must go on prior to actually getting to sleep so that they can then manage those brain waves. Am I correct in that? Because
Yeah,
it's important.
that is essentially it, right? Because I think what you underscored there that's really important is that we don't put anything into the client. There's nothing
Yes.
exogenous that's coming in. It's what we're giving them. It's a skill. It's control and power that they are building for themselves.
Yes.
I
So
think what you said is,
it's just a measure so that they know, and then you work with them, and on a psychological basis, they then manage themselves and manage their brain waves, you might say, downwards.
yeah. So a big part of it is what they refer to as inhibition training. So we're preventing the high energy, the high activation, the high arousal state, because that is it's not possible to properly sleep in that state, right?
Yes.
Only things like in the military, they can things like that, but for the most part, it's not healthy for us as humans.
Okay, let's get to the issue of children and studying and managing. So, for instance, we how do you deal with someone who is, let's say, a bright kid, male or female, and you know that this person is bright, they're intelligent, they're capacious and intelligent, they could pick up anything, they're good at observation, but they won't sit down with the book to give it the time of day. In the online education, they pay 20% attention because, I mean, the teacher really can't know what each student is doing. All right?
Yeah.
If you have face-to-face education, they take in about 20% of what's going on and their mind is elsewhere. If you even have tutelage on a one-to-one, they give it some measure of concentration because it's a one-to-one thing. But you really are sort of divorced mentally from doing this work as a productive endeavor because you have objectives, which is that you would have an exam at the end of the year or at the end of the term or whatever in which you are going to be measured. And doing well is important to you. What it is that causes that kind of, what is it that causes that kind of dislocation in the individual student away from anything having to do with their schoolwork?
So I think what you described there is something that existed before the pandemic, and it's gotten even worse now. What is showing low motivation to do schoolwork. What also happens is that they spend very long doing the schoolwork when they have it. So they're not encouraged to do it because it's just tiresome and tedious. So most of the clients that we have, at least 90% of them, 95% plus 90%, it's issues with cognitive fatigue. So when we get fatigued cognitively, it presents in different ways. In some cases, it's frustration, right? So we get irritable. That with adults and children. In some cases, it's mind wandering. So the mind wanders away, and you see them doodling. They pick up their phone and they go to watch a video, or they minimize the class screen that they're watching, and then they go to watch videos and stuff like that. So when I noticed that with the students, by the way, we've had like 500 plus students pass through our program. When I've noticed that with the students, I realized, well, most of the children, they're not bad. It's not that they're lazy, but they don't work. They're just burning out. And when we resolve those issues with burnout, then they tend to engage the schoolwork a lot more. They're more compliant with the parents. And this is how we do it. So there are certain states that you bring both into when you are highly focused, right? If I were to put their phone in their hands, or they never YouTube video to watch, or video games or whatever, their brain would go into that same state. Exactly the same. So what we do is teach the student how to turn that on when they need to, and then we teach them how to do it with their schoolwork at the same time. So it's not a meditative state, it's a high focus, high performer or peak performance state that we teach them to do. And what we've seen is that they've had improvement in their grades by as much as 200%. Those children come in with 30s and 40s, and this is SEA students, and this is people even who are SEA. Once they're students, you know that difference. Anyway, so they come in at 30 and 40%, and then they train, and in a few weeks, they end up in 80s and 90s. You know, so it's clear that it's not just an educational gap that we have in the home and also in the country, because this same problem exists in Latin America, the same problem exists in Africa and in North America. The same issues. But what we do, we say, okay, we need to throw lessons at it. Right? We need to pay more for lessons. We need to pay more for instruction. We need to reduce the amount of students to teacher, the student to teacher ratio, all those things. But in reality, the gap that we have to close is two. One is a focus gap, and the other one is a perceptual gap. And that's where Allegori comes in and solves the problems.
No, you said a focus gap, and I missed the other one.
The other one is a perception gap.
Perception gap?
Perceptual, yeah. So I can clarify that.
Well, explain that to me so that your listeners, your viewers can understand. What is a perceptual gap? All right, and let's understand that first.
Okay, no problem. So I'll give an example. Very simple. Mental math, right? Mental math requires you to calculate something in your head. If I say 3 plus 3, that one's easy. The answer is 6. You don't have to think about it. Your brain has it stored. But if I say 37 plus 25, it takes a little more time because the answer isn't stored. But what actually requires you to do is to visualize the numbers in your head. You have to be able to see it. And a lot of students don't have the ability to see numbers in their head. So they come across the students who are poor math performers. But they're not poor math performers. They just need to learn how to hold symbols visually in their mind, because holding numbers in your mind is not natural. Nowhere in nature does those shapes appear, right? So it's a skill that actually has to get built. So if they don't cross that hurdle of being able to hold numbers in their head, then they will be poor at arithmetic. And arithmetic is
The
the
basis of
technical problem, that's the math problem, right?
yes,
The perceptual problem is seeing the numbers, and then you're always going to get poor performance in math because arithmetic is the central theme of what math is.
yes.
So I think those are things that need to be passed on to the children so they don't develop this experience of incompetence and disenchantment when it relates to their education.
Let me ask you a hard question, and perhaps you are not prepared for it, which is that, but how do you get the student to agree, first of all, that they will, in fact, try to develop this perceptual skill?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a hard question. That's a good
Huh?
question. So
No, those are
most,
hard questions, huh?
yeah, well,
Because
the thing is,
it's
yeah.
behavioral, it's it's
So I think it's a
attitudinal,
wonderful question because
huh?
I think it's a wonderful question. I've had to encounter it hundreds of times with students. And one thing that we have to disabuse ourselves of or let go is that students don't want to work. They do. We have to we have to have come away from this massa mentality for education where you have to beat them, you have to tell them this, you have to tell them that. It's not so. The other part in terms of applying it is this. We basically do drills with them so that their brain does it for them automatically without them having to think about it. That is the core thing for making it effective. Because it's no longer that they have to be fighting with their brain. Their brain becomes a collaborator. So it's less stress, less fighting up. And guess what? That also speaks to the experience of the parents because the parents have to do less supervision. And we have a lot of moms, especially, because they're the ones who participate in the educational experience of the children, that they carry a lot of anxiety for their child's performance because they have a stressful experience too. And they carry a lot of guilt because they think that it's because of them that they're not performing. And what in turn happens is because we didn't learn a lot of this emotional regulation and how to frame things properly, we tend to put it out as aggression into the children. So we actually become like the colonialist masters for education. We tell our children, come on, produce, 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 and we whip them, or we cajole them. And that colonialist kind of slavery mentality has to come away. Otherwise, we will not be able to get the true productivity and creativity of our citizens.
All right. What you're saying there is very interesting. The so the first thing is to address this issue of the perception or perceptual, as you say, challenge. All right, to create the conditions to address that. And the second one would be to address what might be a kind of attention deficit. Is that right? A
That's
focus.
correct. Yes.
All right. How do you deal with the focus problem? You've got to
So
deal with the perceptual issue first, right?
you can do both at the same time. The
All
key
right.
thing is that
Explain to me.
they require most times different parts of the brain. Your brain's modular. Each part does a particular thing, right? They all talk to each other. Well, a lot of them talk to each other. And they serve the purpose for helping us to enjoy and experience and learn from life, right? So we take a two-pronged approach. Usually we start off with teaching them to solve the focus problem. Because if you can't hold information for a long period of time, then you cannot learn. It's impossible to learn, right? And you see that with children that have learning deficits, and you also see it with people that have dementia. So we have to have the ability to persist for a certain amount of time with thought in order to learn. The other part is perception. There are certain, if we get certain, what is the word I want to use? Right. If we get certain skills or activities, the child thinks that they're just doing an activity, but what they're actually doing is building the skill that we want them to learn. And when they develop the competence, they finish their work faster. And once they finish their work faster, they bring this dopamine because, oh, you completed something. Oh, you completed something. So the work appears to be more enjoyable because we were hardwired, we were designed to enjoy learning. We were designed for that. So you're right in saying that they're two separate things, but they can both be addressed at the same time. Now, with the focus part, we teach them using the same EEG technology to visualize their brain activity and teach them how to regulate it. And they learn this quickly because it states that they already experienced. They just don't know to turn on. So they're able to execute it, even though the work isn't highly engaging, which is one of the things that people with ADD have. They're not highly interesting, they don't engage, and we can solve that very, very quickly.
Okay, you said something that was very interesting, which is that if they are looking at a video or if they're playing a game or whatever, that the level of intensity of focus that you bring to that is exactly what you need to have in dealing with studying your subject matter in your
Yes.
in your school setting or your examination preparation. What if the intensity is for the videos and the video games and the games that you play and whatever else you're doing, and you have a lot of intensity and focus for that, sharpness, etc. But the difficulty is, how do you transfer that to the schooling? How do you get that?
So we usually start by teaching them to execute certain feats, right? That's real important. So we call it the focus zone, right? That's FOCUSZONE. It's longer in literature, but we just call it that so they can pronounce it easily. And they go through a series of drills to make sure that they can execute that. So then we go through drills to contextualize it for their schoolwork. And then their brain starts to do it for them without them having to think about it. I've seen that 100% of the time. And the reason why that is because when you're in a highly focused state, you're also in a low energy state, meaning you're not consuming as much energy per unit time. So your brain says, okay, but wait now, I could do this schoolwork or I could do this work, whichever sector you're in. I can do this work at a lower energy cost. So it says, well, I will just do it this way. Because every living organism wants to do the least amount of work for the most amount of results. And we understand that phenomenon. So we basically build our drills so that their brain starts to do it for them without them having to think about it. That is like the most exciting thing for us to see in the training that we do.
Yeah. Okay, we've got to take a break now for commercials, but when I come back, we're going to continue this discussion. And we're still having a little distortion on your side because of the Wi-Fi and the internet. So just check it for me, please, while we're taking a minute to come back on. All right, this is Brighter Morning with Bo. We are talking with Mr. Kheston Warkins of Allegori Innovations, and we will be back in a minute. Brighter Morning with Bo. I am Bo Tiwari.
Welcome to Lifetime Solutions, where you can trust your roof to us. Our services include custom fabrication, steel framing, roofing installation, on-site roll forming, roofing maintenance and services. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com. Lifetime Solutions. You can trust your roof to us. Call 223-ROOF or 223-7663 for a quote today, or visit our website www.lifetimesolutionstt.com.
As businesses adapt to the new normal, let Magic Mist take care of your cleaning and sanitization needs with our COVID-19 BSCAI internationally certified technicians. With over 43 years of protecting the health of our nation, you can trust us to ensure your building remains safe, healthy, and functional. Give us a call today at 638-6675 or 332-5522. Magic Mist Services Limited, your total facilities management solutions provider.
I am Boxer Potts, and you are?
I am the host of our talk. You refer to me as Mr. Zaid Mohammed.
Join us Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Hard Talk, Hard Facts, Hard Hitting, not politically soft like my brethren in this side here.
And that is old talk, not hard talk.
This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and we're talking about things like sleep disorders. We're talking about attention span in students. We're talking about getting students to focus. We're talking about the perceptual gap that helps students to, that prevents students from basically giving the work that they need to do for examinations, for school, etc., the kind of attention that it needs. And we are talking to Kheston Warkins of Allegori Innovations. Kheston, you've had success with this with individual people, that's to say adults, and individual children that you work with?
Yeah, definitely. We started a couple of years ago, like 2+, coming on to 3 years, and we've worked with over 570 people. About 90% of them are students who are preparing for exams. Another 7%, 5% or so are adults who are preparing for exams. And then we also have another group, a smaller group of people that have anxiety, people that have sleep issues, insomnia, and also individuals that they want to just get more out of themselves. So they know they're not getting everything that they could, and they want to get some more. So those tend to be the people that we serve.
How long, when you make an intervention with an individual, how long does it take approximately?
So with sleep sessions, they start to see a difference. I've had people come train now and then go to sleep for a full night when they were only getting 1 hour of sleep. So it depends on the individual. For students, the engagement is usually around 8 to 10 seconds. But that's still great time, because in a month or two, you can have a really, really big improvement in your grades. Which is a big difference compared to lessons, right? With lessons, you get a 10%, 50% if you're real improvements in the grades. But with us, you can get a lot more. And this is what we want to bring for the front with our program, Recovery TP, which I know we'll talk about later. We want to give them the access to these things, because currently our services and systems they don't provide, and we can provide it at scale, and we want to keep this as something free to help the country recover.
Have you had situations where the person did not respond at all to what you are trying to do, or you've just had situations in which they have not responded optimally?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In some cases, it takes a longer time. So if they have enough time, there's a difference. And when I say enough time, like we see stuff in some weeks, right? In some cases, the client takes a couple months, or especially with clients who are older than 60, tend to take a little bit longer with sleep issues than the ones that are younger. They tend to pick it up much more quickly. To students, if they don't practice the techniques, then they don't get the big difference that they need. And out of the 500 people that I've had, there's only about 2 people that have encountered that challenge with. So it's very rare.
So you have a good success rate then.
Yeah.
You think these kinds of interventions are needed in Trinidad and Tobago? And if clearly you are having success with people who come to you with the problem. Where is the best intervention? With the individual in the home, or is it possible to do this like for an entire class at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question you asked, and I'm going to answer it slightly differently. I think when we look at Trinidad, a lot of times we try to do a top-down thing with policy and stuff like that, right? And we hope that the law enforcement and the agencies execute. But I think we should start from the simplest level of complexity. And the simplest level of complexity is an individual. The second level is the family. The third level, at least in our society right now, is the workplace. And then you can look at systems and national effects. And I think that's the way that we should go about it. So my answer now directly to what you said speaks to that.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. You can work with the individual and you can work with the class. Like we've worked with Bishop Anstey Jr. and we had this as part of the co-curricular activities. Students would go to English, they go to math, and then they come to train with Allegori, right? And those students had a very significant statistically improvement in their grades. And even though we didn't train all the students in the class, there was as much as a 10% improvement in the class average. So there we see that if you just help some individuals improve, then you can actually have a whole big impact on the full system, which is really, really powerful. And I think the other part that was amazing was when we trained teachers, because we said, let's do education as work with all the stakeholders, parents, the teachers, etc. When we work with these teachers, the teachers report covering more work in their class when they do the training, even though children weren't in the class that trained. So there is also something that's important for us to make sure we're taking care of our teachers and they're equipped to handle the rigors and the stresses of the workplace with children, especially when attention is.
What are you've studied this phenomenon, what are the theoretical foundations behind the things that you do? What are some of the informing principles behind what you do? What is the thinking about why these interventions are necessary?
Yes, so there are three main tenets that we follow that are well documented. The first one we refer to as the purpose, meaning every part of your brain has a particular function, and when you change the activity, you change the likelihood of it performing that function. The second one, what we call the price. Everything costs energy, and if you have a high energy state, and then it burns more energy per unit time, so you get exhausted. So if we can reduce the energy requirement to perform that task, you tend to become more efficient. And that happens, it doesn't matter if you're exercising or you're studying, your brain and your body adapts to those changes, right? And then that also leads me into the final one, which we refer to as plasticity. And that is that the human brain and body is willing daily to adjust so that we can have a fulfilling life. And those three P's are what we use for kind of guiding us through our programs. And that's why we tend to not try to vilify the clients. And we tell them, don't worry, you will get it. Because we are sure of it, because that's how we were designed in the first place.
Okay. So you start from the premise that there's nothing wrong with the person, and the person wants to do well, and the person can do well, but we've got to get this alignment of brain functions. Is that correct?
That's correct. You have to learn to work with what they have. That is reality. That is power. It's not working with what you don't have. It's not looking at just the deficits, it's about working with what you have.
All right. Now, you use an interesting word, which is burnout, and you used it in relation to students. You said when they have this attention deficit, when they have this lack of focus, when they have this perceptual gap, many times it's because of burnout. Explain to me what burnout is, because I think the concept you are using doesn't really have to do with working too hard and getting burnout out of that. So explain it to me. I think it's something else.
Yeah, so I'm referring to two things. One of them, for sure, is working memory. Working memory is the memory that's used for pretty much everything in your life. Math, comprehension, deciding what you're going to wear today. All working memory is part of that story. So when we are stressed, the amount that we can hold in working memory contracts. That's why people go into the exam, they get anxious, and then their mind goes blank. It's because they can't move the information from the long-term memory into the working memory so that they can process it on the paper. Now, that applies to students. It also applies to adults. Now, when you come, and maybe you know what I'm talking about. You have a list of things that you have to do, and somebody come in and say, well, yeah, one more thing. Even though that thing is just move this from this part of the room to that part of the room, it causes great discomfort, right? And that's because the amount of things that you can hold and store comfortably in working memory is being exceeded. And that barrel of space, that pocket space that you have when you're stressed. So the burnout I'm referring to is the ability for us to endure cognitive difficulty. That is what I'm referring to. And that changes based on lifestyle, that changes based on diet, that changes based on sleep. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, explain what you just said, which are cognitive difficulties. What are those? Why is it important? First of all, what are they? Secondly, why is it important to cope with them? And thirdly, how do you address these cognitive difficulties when they arise?
Yeah, so it's important what they are, first of all. What they are is anything that requires us to think, right? Anything that is important. Anything that requires us to think.
Right, okay.
That's a cognitive challenge. So that could be, how do I answer my boss? That could be, how do I answer my child? That could be, well, lots of different things. I don't need to go through a run of examples, but you get that point. Why is it important? Because we have to process the world in order to enjoy it. A lot of people have the approach to ignore and run away from it, but those people don't enjoy life. We have to process it in order to enjoy it, because all of our senses and all of our cognition speaks to that story. Smell, food, accessibility to food, even with sex and intimacy with our partners. All of those things are part of that story and require cognitive attention. And when you have fragmented attention, then you have issues with each of those things that I mentioned. You don't have to go to them in detail. And then the last part was, how do we address them? I think that's what you said, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So then how do we address them? We mentioned earlier on, letting the person know that nothing's wrong with them. They just have to work with what they have. That's important because there's psychology in it. You have to be able to reframe your experience. Otherwise, you run into the challenge of going back to when you were a child and everybody said that everything you do was wrong and they were nitpicking in everything you do. So it stifles your creativity, stifles different parts of your life. The second part is teaching them to control their mind, showing them that they have their power. And that's the sweet thing about data and the sweet thing about neuroscience. Data don't lie and your brain don't. So when they see that they have the power, it innovates them with energy and resolve. Because they say, well, I never knew I could do this. That's the most common thing I hear. I never knew I could do this. And their faces change, their countenance changes, they emote more. And people have, parents have children who they're expressionless most of the time, right? But they start to engage their emotions and have an enjoyment with dealing with it. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, well, I must say I like the trend of this discussion and some of the things that you've said, because most of the time, when people talk and use the word empowerment, they try to get people into a psychological state where they can take charge of their lives and do something positive for themselves or for others, But you go one step further and you get into the brain and you basically measure what the brain is doing to give you a sense of how you need to proceed in order to get control of your brain so you can get control of yourself so that you can empower yourself to do the things that are necessary. And I want you to close on that because we're going to have to close now. If you'd respond to that, and we'll close the discussion at this point.
Yes, I'll try to make this quick because there's something I want to plug too. So you are right. When we have control over ourselves, we have control over the world. That's very powerful and very important. If you don't have some control, the world is not yours. And that's why we realize with the healthcare workers that we want to provide free training for them at no cost. Just go to our website, that's allegori.org, at no cost. And we want to give you that power back because that is what is going to save our country. Because you help us to stay safe and well. And we realize that as part of the private sector, and we want to give that back to you. So, Dr. Tiwari, thanks so much. I enjoyed this discussion. I hope we get another one. It was really great.
Yeah, well, no, I enjoyed the discussion too because, I try to learn from everything I do and I try to teach in everything that I do. And I can't get away from the fact that, education is really a beautiful thing and you've got to be in learning mode and teaching mode all the time in order to expand the knowledge of everyone, And that's what we try to do here. But I want to give you close on this bit. So that for, let's say, a student who is caught up in games and stuff like that, you've got to really get that student to understand that by being focused on that and ignoring the schoolwork and the examinations that will help you to move in life, by doing that, you are really giving the power to the games and so on. But by empowering yourself, you can have the games when you want, and you can do the things that will get you ahead in life. Is that correct?
That's right. It's about access, not deprivation. That's it.
Sorry, say that again.
It's about access, not deprivation. It's not about stealing your joy away. It's about giving you access to power and enjoyment for the future. I agree with what you said.
And it's about giving yourself real power and control and the right of choice and the ability to do more rather than to do one thing or do less and ignoring the rest and depriving yourself of opportunities.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, Kheston Warkins. We will talk again another time. God bless. This is Brighter Morning with Bo. We've been talking to Kheston Warkins of Allegori Innovations. Thank you for watching. This is Brighter Morning with Bo on MCTV. I am Bo Tiwari. Tomorrow we'll have 2 full discussions with the Deputy Commissioner of Police, who is in charge of the police force, and we are going to talk to him about crime and other issues in Trinidad and Tobago. But we are also going to be talking to Dr. Roger Hussein, and we will be talking to him about the recent World Bank report, which was published 2 or 3 days ago, on the condition of the Caribbean and its economic and sustainable development challenges. So be sure to be here in the morning.